Hello, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Driti Atri, and you're once again watching Skyline. Tonight, just forget everything that you have heard about Iran-US conflict because this war, that's no longer just about missiles, fighter jets, or military bases. This war has quietly entered your offices, your salaries, your investments, and even your visa status. If you are an Indian living in America, if your son, your daughter is studying there, if somebody in your family works on an H-1B visa, or if you're simply a non-Indian and still working in the United States, well, this episode is surely for you. Because today, I'm going to show you something that most headlines are not really talking about. Somebody is asking who fired the missile, which country attacked first, who destroyed whose missile base. But almost nobody is asking that who will pay the price here. And believe me, the answer is not America, the answer is not Iran. The answer could be millions of ordinary people, including Indians who are living abroad. Tonight we have 9 big important stories. Every story is connected, by the way. Every story reveals one piece of much bigger puzzle. And by the end of this episode, you will understand why the next few months could become one of the most difficult periods for NRIs, students, professionals, and even Americans across the globe. So let's start with it. Now, first of all, when we hear about war, we usually imagine missiles flying across the sky, fighter jet explosion burning cities. But today's war, they do not stay on the battlefield. They travel across oceans. They travel through oil prices, through shipping routes, through company balance sheet, and finally, they reach your paycheck. And that is exactly what is happening today. The fragile ceasefire between the United States and Iran has broken down once again. Fresh military actions has returned to one of the world's most important waterways, again, the Strait of Hormuz. This isn't just another sea route, as I keep on repeating. Nearly 1/5 of the world's oil passes through this narrow stretch of water every single day. Can you imagine a major highway suddenly getting blocked? Everything slows down, everything becomes more expensive, and eventually everyone pays the price. Now here the price is oil. Oil prices have risen. Shipping becomes more expensive. In fact, factories spend more money producing goods. Transport companies pay more for fuel, airlines spend more, food companies spend more, tech companies spend more. One crisis, it has created another. And before you even realize, the entire global economy starts feeling the pressure. Now, here's where the story becomes personal. Many Indian professionals work in companies like Amazon, Microsoft, Meta, Google, consulting firms, financial companies, and startups. These companies have already invested billions of dollars into artificial intelligence. They are already spending huge amount on data centers, chips, cloud infrastructure. Now suddenly energy cost rises, transport cost rises, supply chain cost rises, and when companies start spending more, they immediately begin looking for places to save money. Sadly, the easiest place to cut, that's people. Not machines, not software, people. We have seen layoffs before, right? After COVID, many companies hired too many employees. Then came reconstructing and thousands of jobs were lost. But experts now fear something different here. The next wave of layoffs may not happen because companies hired too many people. It may happen because the world has become much more unstable. Companies become cautious, boards become nervous, investors demand profit, and management begins asking just one very difficult question, by the way. Where can we reduce cost immediately? Here for many multinational companies, foreign workers become one of the easiest targets during reconstruction. Now, wait, think about this. Thousands of Indians in America work on employer-based visas, right? Their legal status, their future, their family's future. It all depends on one company. If that particular company, it starts downsizing, then their jobs isn't the only thing at risk. Their visas could also be affected, and suddenly, a geopolitical conflict in West Asia, that can become a personal crisis for a software engineer sitting in Seattle, or maybe a consultant working in Dallas, or a data scientist living in New Jersey. And that is why wars today are different. The bomb may fall in one country, but its shockwaves travel across the globe. But yes, losing your job, that is only half the problem here, because even if you manage to keep your job, Another major change has quietly taken place inside America's immigration system. And yes, it could make your future far more uncertain. Ladies and gentlemen, for years, millions of Indians believed just one thing: study hard, get a job, find an employer, apply for an H-1B lottery, and hope luck is in your side. But that system has now changed dramatically. The US has officially closed the H-1B visa cap for financial year 2027. There will be no second lotteries, by the way, but the biggest surprise is not the quota is full. The biggest surprise is how people were selected. Earlier, luck played a major role here. Today, salaries matter much more. The US government has shifted towards a wage-focused selection process. Let me simplify this for you. The higher your offered salary, the stronger your chances become. The lower your wage level, the harder it becomes to get selected. Think what it means. A young engineer just beginning a career could now face much tougher odds than an experienced professional earning a higher salary. According to the latest figure, by the way, more than 71% of selected candidates held advanced US degree. In the meantime, less than 18% came from the lowest wage categories, and that's a huge shift. For years, big IT companies could send thousands of engineers to America on entry-level salaries. Now, that model, it is becoming much harder. Companies must justify paying higher wages. If they cannot, then they may lose visa sponsorship altogether. This could specifically affect consulting companies and IT service providers that traditionally relied on large number of H-1B workers. Now, another important question. Some people might ask that if America becomes difficult, why not simply return to India? Now, a few years ago, that sounded like a practical option, right? Today, the answer, it is not simple. India's tech hiring has slowed significantly. Competition has increased, AI is changing job requirements, companies are becoming far more selective. Returning home no longer guarantees the same salary, the same opportunity, and the same lifestyle many professionals had become used to overseas. Now, solution time. What should professionals do here? Here, experts increasingly say that don't wait for problems to arise. Start discussing long-term immigration options with your employer. If eligible, explore permanent residency path instead of depending only on temporary visa. Build emergency saving, upgrade your skills specifically in fields like AI, cloud computing, cybersecurity, and semiconductor technology. Because in today's world, your degree alone, that is no longer enough. Your adaptability has become your biggest strength. Well, the global job market is changing faster than ever before, and those who prepare early will always have a better chance of surviving uncertainty. So far, ladies and gentlemen, we have talked about employees, professionals, and H-1B workers. But what if you own a business in America? Because the same conflict that threatened jobs is now beginning to squeeze businesses as well, and that's where our next story begins. Thousands of Indians have built successful businesses across the United States and Canada. Some own restaurants, some run grocery stores, others manage trucking companies, hotels, motels, retail stores, for food distribution businesses, farm and import-export companies, everything. Many spend years building these businesses, believing that hard work alone, it is enough to survive. But today, a crisis that began thousands of kilometers away in West Asia, it is quietly reaching their balance sheet. Now, when people hear about Strait of Hormuz, most people think about what? Oil? Yes, oil is important, but there is another problem that isn't getting the same attention. A huge amount of world's fertilizers, natural gas and agriculture chemicals also move through this region only. And as tension rises and shipping slows down, supplies become limited and prices, it begins to climb. Now, you may wonder, what does fertilizer has to do with an Indian restaurant owner in New York or grocery store owner in California, right? The answer is everything. When fertilizers become expensive, farmers spend more money growing crops. When farmers spend more, food processing companies spend more. And when food companies spend more, wholesalers increase their price. In the end, when wholesalers increase their prices, the final burden that reaches restaurants, supermarkets, and small businesses. Can you imagine running a family restaurant? Every week you buy vegetables. Every week you buy rice, wheat, cooking oil, spices. If every single item becomes more expensive, then your expenses, it shoots up, and that too overnight. But can you simply double the price of every meal? Probably not. Consumers are already dealing with inflation. If prices rise too much, many may stop coming to you, and that leaves the business owners trapped between rising costs and failing demand. The same story applies to Indian grocery stores here. Every shipment costs more, transportation costs more, electricity bills rise. In fact, warehouses become more expensive, insurance costs increase, and slowly profit margin, it begins disappearing. Businesses that looked healthy just a few months ago suddenly find themselves under financial pressure. And yes, the challenges don't end there. When inflation rises, central banks often keep interest rate higher for longer. That means business loan becomes more expensive. Credit becomes harder to access. Entrepreneurs planning to expand their stores, open a second location, or maybe buy new equipments may decide to postpone those plans because borrowing money now costs much, much more. Well, many Indian entrepreneurs also send money back to India, import products from Indian suppliers, or they need to maintain businesses in both the nations. Rising shipping costs and disruption in global trade, it make all of these activities more difficult and far more expensive. A business that depends on smooth international trade, it suddenly faces delays, uncertainty, and higher costs at every single step. This is the new reality of globalization. You don't need a bomb to fall near your business. Well, for your business to suffer here. Sometimes all it takes a blocked shipping route, and that to thousands of kilometers away. But yes, business today, it does not stop there, because now another important trade route, one in which India invested heavily, is facing fresh uncertainty, and that could affect not just businesses but India's global ambitions as well. Now, whenever India talks about strengthening global trade, one name often comes up: Chabahar port. For years, India viewed this particular port in Iran as a strategic gateway. It offered India a way to reach Central Asia and parts of Europe without depending entirely on Pakistan's land route. It wasn't just another infrastructure project for us. It represented India's long-term vision for expanding trade and improving connectivity across the whole region. But today, that vision faces serious challenges. Ladies and gentlemen, recent military developments and growing sanction-related concern have brought fresh uncertainty about Chabahar. Well, questions are now being raised about the future of this important trade corridor. Now, some people may ask one question: why should an ordinary Indian, or maybe an Indian in the US, care about one port here? Well, here is the answer. Because ports are much more than places where ships dock. They are the gateway through which goods move across the world. If an important route it slows down, businesses must look for another, maybe longer and more expensive alternative. That means higher shipping costs, longer delivery time, and more pressure on companies that depend on international trade. Can you imagine ordering products that normally takes maybe 3 weeks to arrive? Now they take 5 or maybe 6. Transport companies may pay for fuel. In fact, insurance costs can rise, importers have to pay more, exporters earn less. Gradually, these extra costs spread through the entire supply chain until consumers begin paying more for everyday product. Well, for companies with operations in both India and overseas, these disruptions create even bigger uncertainty. Businesses become cautious about new investment. Expansion, it plans to slow down, recruitment decisions are delayed. Some companies even postpone hiring because they don't really know how long global uncertainty will continue. And this will also affect professionals who are working in multinational companies. When businesses become uncertain about future costs, they often delay the projects, reduce the hiring, and control spending more carefully. That it can really influence job market, it can influence salary growth and international transfer. And there's another financial angle as well. Whenever geopolitical tension rise, global investors usually move the money towards safer assets. Currency markets that become volatile. Exchange rate, it fluctuates. While a stronger US dollar, it may increase the value of money sent to India. Rising inflation can reduce its real purchasing power. In simple words, the number may look bigger, but the money may not go as far as before. And that is why geopolitics, it is no longer something only governments worry about. It affects businesses, employees, investors, and families alike. Decisions taken in one part of the world, it can quietly reshape opportunities elsewhere. Well, so far we have looked at how these crises, it is affecting jobs, businesses, and trade. But now let's shift from economics to politics. Because a fresh political controversy in New York, it has sparked a global debate involving Israel, international law, and one of the world's most closely watched leader. And that is all about our next story. Well, we have spent the first half of tonight's show talking about wars, businesses, and global economy, but now let's move to a political controversy that has grabbed global attention. Can you imagine this? The Prime Minister of Israel, he visits New York to attend a major international event. And suddenly there are calls for his arrest. Sounds unbelievable, right? But that is exactly the debate that has erupted after New York City's mayor, Zoran Mamdani, he said that his legal team was examining what action could be taken if Israeli Prime Minister, Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu, he visits New York. Well, the remarks immediately sparked a political storm, not in the US but also in Israel. Mr. Netanyahu's office responded strongly. It accused Mamdani of trying to distract people from local issues and rejecting the International Criminal Court's arrest warrant against the Israeli leader. Well, Israel has consistently argued that ICC has no legal right over Israeli officials and has denied allegations related to war in Gaza. But here's the bigger problem. Can the mayor of New York actually arrest the Israeli Prime Minister? Well, according to many legal experts here, the answer is no. The US is not a member of International Criminal Court. American federal law, it does not allow local governments to enforce ICC arrest warrant. Several legal experts have described the idea as legally baseless, and New York City Governor Kathy, well, that person has also said that the city's mayor does not have the authority to order such an arrest. Even the US Senator John Fetterman, he strongly criticized the whole proposal, saying that the mayor had no power to carry it out and should focus instead on issues facing New York City. But why is this whole issue so important? Because it goes far beyond one politician. It raises bigger question. How much power should international courts have? Can international arrest warrants be enforced inside countries that do not recognize those courts? And where do international law and national sovereignty collide? Well, these are questions governments around the globe continue to debate about. For now, Mr. Netanyahu, he has indicated that he will not allow such threats to stop him from attending international meetings, including events at United Nations in New York. Sometimes a single political statement, it creates headline across the globe. But behind those headlines lie much bigger legal and diplomatic questions. While politicians continue exchanging sharp words, another voice has emerged from other side of the conflict, by the way. Iran's foreign minister, Mr. Abbas Araghchi, he has now revealed what it was with negotiating with the US while fearing that every meeting could be his last. Now, war, it is not fought with missiles, but sometimes the most powerful stories come not from the battlefield but from negotiating table. Iran's foreign minister, Mr. Abbas Araghchi, he has shared a deeply personal account of what he says happened during nuclear talks with the United States. And his words offer a rare glimpse into the human side of diplomacy. Mr. Araghchi, he recalled speaking with Steve Witkoff, President Donald Trump's West Asia's envoy. In fact, during that conversation, he posted a striking question. He asked, well, how you ever attended a meeting thinking that it could be bombed at any moment? He even went further. He said that there were moments when he called his family and wondered whether it might be the last time he would ever speak to them. Now, whether one agrees with Iran's position or not, these remarks remind us of something important here. Diplomacy is not always conducted inside comfortable conference room. Sometimes negotiations happen under a lot of pressure with the constant fear that violation could erupt at any moment. Mr. Arakchi also claimed that Iran refused to give in to the US demand regarding its nuclear program, and according to him, Tehran stood firm during negotiations, and when talks failed to produce the outcome, Washington wanted the conflict escalated into open military confrontation. These are Iran's claim, and the US has presented its own perspective on the conflict. The Iranian minister also dismissed comparison between Iran and other nations where outside military pressure has influenced political change. He argued that Iran's political system is structured very differently and would not collapse simply because of pressure on an individual leader here. And in the meanwhile, the military situation continues to worsen, by the way. According to the US Central Command, American forces have launched another wave of strikes targeting Iran's ability to threaten the commercial shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. And yes, at the very same time, Iranian state-linked media reported missile strikes in several Iranian cities and claimed that Iranian forces carried out attacks on the US military assets in the region. Well, both sides continue to release competing accounts as tension remain high. One thing is definitely becoming clear. The chances of returning to meaningful negotiations appear to be shrinking. Every new military strike, it makes diplomacy more difficult. Every fresh attack, it deepens the mistrust, and every passing day increases the risk that this conflict could spread even further. But yes, while diplomats speak about peace, events on the battlefield are telling a much different story. Because the latest report, it suggests that conflicts have entered a dangerous new phase, with fresh claims about military casualties and damage on both the ends. Well, that's where we will continue our next story. For weeks, the world has been watching missiles fly across the West Asia. Every day, there are reports of fresh airstrikes, drone attacks, and military escalation. But now, this conflict has reached another dangerous milestone. According to the Pentagon here, 4 American service members have been killed during recent Iranian attack. 3 soldiers reportedly lost their lives during missile and drone strike on the US military facilities in Jordan, while another American soldier was killed in Iraq while handling unexploded ordnance left behind after an Iranian drone attack. In the meantime, US Defense Secretary Mr. Pete Hegseth, he confirmed the death, while President Trump described the loss of American troops as very sad. These casualties mark another major escalation in the conflict between Washington and Tehran, and highlight just how quickly the whole situation it is worsening across the region. Here, every military death, it changes the political equation. When soldiers lose their lives, government comes under a lot of pressure to respond. Public opinion, it hardens. Military commanders demand stronger action. Diplomacy, it becomes more difficult. And every retaliatory strike increases the risk of even bigger confrontation. And this is why military experts believe that casualties are often the point where conflict becomes much more harder to control. One strike leads to another, one retaliation demands another response. Both sides. Before long, both sides find themselves trapped in a cycle of escalation. Well, the bigger concern today is that this conflict, it's no longer limited to just one country. American forces remain deployed across several parts of West Asia. Iran has influence through allied groups in different countries. Every military base, every naval vessel, and every strategic installation, it now becomes a potential target. For the ordinary people, though, this means continued uncertainty. Energy markets remain nervous, global investors, they remain cautious. Airlines closely monitor regional airspaces, shipping companies continue assessing security risk. Every new attack sends another wave of concern through global physical market here. Well, as the whole conflict expands, the question is no longer whether tensions are rising. The real question is how far this confrontation could go before diplomacy finally returns. But yes, while reports of casualties are making headlines, another report has sparked an equally intense debate. Satellite images are now being cited as evidence that Iran may have caused greater damage to American military assets than previously believed. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the biggest challenges during any war is separating confirmed facts from the claims made by both the ends. Every government wants to project strength here. In fact, every military wants to show success, and sometimes the truth becomes difficult to verify in real time. Now, a fresh assessment has brought new attention to this issue. According to an analyst reported by the New York Times, based on satellite images, verified videos, and official statements, Iranian missile strikes have caused greater damage to certain US military facilities in Jordan than it was initially understood. The report says multiple UH-60 Black Hawk helicopters were damaged at Muwafaq Salti Air Base during repeated missile and drone attacks. It also notes that at least 17 US associated military sites, including 11 American installations, have reportedly come under attack during the conflict here. However, the US military has not publicly confirmed these reported losses. The last point, it's extremely important here. The assessment point to damage based on available images and evidence, but official confirmation from the US military regarding any reported aircraft lost, that has not been revealed. And this is something that we often see during conflict, right? Independent analysts study satellite images, videos, and open source intelligence just to understand what may have happened on the ground. In the meantime, governments may choose not to immediately disclose operation losses for security or maybe strategic reasons here. Well, regardless of the exact level of damage, one fact is becoming increasingly clear. Military bases across West Asia are operating under a lot of pressure. Drone warfare have changed modern conflict. Missile technology has become more advanced and long-range precision strike have become more common. Well, even highly protected military facilities now face growing risk here. And that changes military planning for every single country that's involved. And yes, as the conflict continues, more satellite images, official statements, and independent investigations are likely to emerge. Until then, many of these battlefield assessments remain under close scrutiny. But if those reports were not dramatic enough, Iran has now made even bigger claim. It says it targeted American aircraft, destroyed military hangars, and even shot down a US drone. So, what exactly is being claimed, and has any of this been independently verified? That's our next segment. Well, as this conflict continues to grow, the battlefield is no longer the only place where the fight is happening. Alongside missiles and military operations, there is another war that is unfolding. A war of information. Every day, both the ends release new claims, new videos, and new statements. Some are confirmed, often remain disputed. And for people watching this from around the globe, separating facts from claim, that has become much more difficult for us. Well, the latest example comes from the IRGC. It claims that it has launched ballistic missiles targeting the American military aircraft at Jordan's Aqaba airport. According to them, several C-17 military transport aircraft and Boeing P-8 surveillance aircraft were heavily damaged during the attack. Well, they also claim that nearly 20 military hangars in Salti base, they were destroyed. In a separate claim, Iran's Mehr news agency reported that American MQ-9 Reaper drones were intercepted and shot down over western Iran. However, it's very important to note that the US or Jordan, none of the nations have confirmed these allegations completely. And this is why every major conflict today, it has two battlefields. The first is the physical battlefield where missiles, drones, and soldiers are involved. And the second is information battlefield where every country tries to shape public opinion. Every successful strike, it becomes a headline. Every military loss, that is managed. Every government wants to project confidence, and every side wants the entire world to believe that it has the upper hand. Whether these latest Iranian claims are ultimately confirmed or not, one reality cannot be ignored. Military installations across West Asia are facing increasing pressure. Drone technology has become more sophisticated. Precision-guided missiles are changing modern warfare. Bases that were once considered relatively secured are now constantly on alert. Well, as the conflict expands, more satellite images, intelligence assessment, and official statements will likely emerge. Until then, many of these reports should be viewed with caution, while independent verification that continues. But yes, even if the fighting eventually slows down, another battle has already begun. This one is not about fighting or maybe missiles, it is fought with money. The US is now facing a different kind of challenge: how to punish countries like Russia and Iran without weakening the global power of US dollar. Well, a new Russia sanction bill has triggered intense debate in Washington. The proposed legislation would make sanction on Russia mandatory instead of optional and could also impose tariff on countries that continues to buy Russian oil and gas. And that's a sad news for India though. There are also discussions that the scope of the bill could later expand to include Iran and Hezbollah. Well, lawmakers from both the major political parties believe that legislation has strong chance of becoming a law. But here's where the story becomes fascinating. For decades, one of America's greatest strengths has been the dominance of US dollar. Because most international trade it is conducted in dollars. Washington has been able to use the financial sanction as one of the most powerful foreign policy tools. Countries that are sanctioned often lose easy access to the global financial system, and that gives the US a lot of economic influence here. However, some officials inside the Trump administration they are now worried that overusing sanction could eventually encourage more countries to reduce their dependence on the US dollar. If nations begin to trade more in China's yuan or maybe other currencies, America's financial influence could gradually weaken. And that is why the administration has started reviewing how sanctions are used while also trying to preserve the dollar's position as the world's leading reserve country. Well, International Monetary Fund data in the meantime shows that around 57% of the world's foreign exchange reserves are held in the US dollar, making it by far the most dominant global currency. But wait, policymakers do understand that maintaining that position that requires careful balancing. While sanctions remain an important diplomatic tool, yet using them too aggressively could create long-term unintended consequences. And that brings us to the biggest lesson from today's episode, ladies and gentlemen. When we hear about wars, we often think that they are only about soldiers, missiles, or borders. But the truth is that modern conflicts reach much further. They affect jobs, businesses, supply chain, investment, immigration policies, currencies, and the life of ordinary families around the globe. The conflict that begins in West Asia, it can influence the future of an H-1B worker in California. It can affect an Indian entrepreneur running a grocery store in New Jersey. It can change investment decisions in Mumbai. It can influence shipping costs, inflation, even the strength of world's most powerful currency. And that is why geopolitics is no longer just about governments. In fact, it's about all of us. And that's all for today's edition of Skyline. I'm Driti Atri. Thank you for watching. Stay informed, stay aware, and I'll see you in the next episode.